We were talking at the table about my children. And as Connie mentioned, I have 5. Our boys are 15 and 17, and our girls are 21, 23, and 27. And there have been so many moments of reflection about sort of the last 16, 17, 18 months. And people ask me often about how my kids are doing and how they're thinking about things. And, you know, one thing that did occur to me today, watching the news from Ukraine, thinking about everything that we've been dealing with, is especially, I think, our younger children. And I say this to everybody in the room who has kids. The velocity of things that are happening in the world right now is something that, you know, I think those of us who have lived through different eras politically understand how unusual this is. But I don't think our children necessarily understand that. And one of the moments that really affected me in the days just after January 6th was sitting at dinner with my husband, Phil, and our 2 sons. And we were talking about what had happened on the 6th and talking about what it meant. And as I looked at my boys, it occurred to me that for my whole life, and probably everybody in this room, for our whole lives, we have assumed that there will be a peaceful transition of power in the United States of America. And I had that thought, and I looked at my sons, and I thought, is that going to be true for them? And how critically important it is that every one of us do everything in our power to make sure that is true for all of our children. And one of the memories that stands out for me before I was elected myself was the inauguration in January of 2001. And so I'm sure many of you in the room remember what a hard-fought campaign that was. And I'll tell you a side story about that. One of the people who's become a very good friend of mine in the last several months is Jamie Raskin, Congressman from Maryland. And when Jamie and I first met, we were on the floor of the House. We were elected the same year, Democrat, obviously I'm Republican. And Jamie and I were talking, and he said to me, you know, I'm a constitutional law professor. And I said, oh, that's wonderful. And he said, I've written some books. I said, you know what, why don't you send me? I'd love to see, you know, one of your books. And he was very sheepish and quiet for a minute. And he said, well, my most recent book is about how George Bush and Dick Cheney stole the election in 2000. I said, well, I don't really need that one. You can give me one of the other ones. But I do recall very vividly sitting on the inaugural platform in January of 2001. And so, you know, we'd gone through the 37 days and all the way up to the Supreme Court twice, and had this unbelievably hard-fought campaign that came down to a little over 500 votes in the state of Florida. And I remember sitting there and seeing Al Gore on the platform. And this was from, you know, I remember this now from 21 years ago, and being so moved and thinking, you know, he and the people who worked for him, they believe they won this election. And they fought as hard as we fought. And yet, here they are. Because this is the United States of America, and we have peaceful transfers of power. And that is such an important message as we think about, you know, what is happening around the world today, as we think about what January 6th means. Certainly, it is absolutely unprecedented. And I was fully aware when I took the assignment that it was unprecedented for a Republican to take an assignment on a committee from a Democratic Speaker of the House. But I had no hesitation. I wish that we had had a bipartisan commission. I voted for that. 35 of my Republican colleagues in the House voted for that. A bipartisan commission made up of people who aren't currently members of Congress, with you know, complete equal numbers of Democrats and Republicans in the staff. I think that would have been much better for the country. But once that was defeated, then the option became, are you going to investigate what happened the worst attack on the United States Capitol since the War of 1812 or not. And to me, there's just not a question. And I have to tell you, I am so incredibly proud every day of how this committee is operating. And I would ask you to tune out the politics, because we tune out the politics on the committee. And I have never been part of anything like that in Washington. And we are not perfect. But the extent to which on that committee our focus is recognizing, I don't think there's a single issue that I agree with Adam Schiff on. I don't think there's a single issue that I agree with most of the members on the Democratic side of the committee on, except the issue that matters more than any other issue, and that is the Constitution of the United States of America, and whether or not our elected officials are going to take their obligations seriously. And if I could sum up both the lessons of what's gone on since January 6th and the lessons of what's happening in the world today as we watch Russia invade Ukraine. It's something that somebody said to me just a few weeks after January 6th. And this colleague of mine said to me, some things have to matter. And I just ask you all to think about that. Some things have to matter. And we get very accustomed here, especially in Washington, especially in the political world, to thinking about politics, politics, politics. And I think we have a duty to remember that politics has a purpose. The Republican Party was founded for a purpose. It was founded because of what we believe in, because we believe in principle, because we believe in substance. As Republicans, we believe in limited government and low taxes and a strong national defense. We believe in conservative policies that are right for the country. But some things matter more than politics. And that is true, absolutely, of understanding what happened and how we got to where we were on January 6th, making sure it never happens again. It's also true in terms of America and the world. And when I think about America and the world and what has to matter, America must stand for freedom. There can be no equivocation between a democratically elected sovereign government, a sovereign nation of Ukraine, and Vladimir Putin, who's conducting the most horrific, significant, large-scale military attack on the continent of Europe since World War II. And it's going to get worse. The Ukrainians, as you all have seen, we've been unbelievably just inspired by the Ukrainians defending themselves, their families, and their homes. And they have absolutely thwarted Vladimir Putin's plans. They have delayed what he thought he would be able to do. And ultimately, Vladimir Putin will lose. Ultimately, he will lose because he must. Now, that doesn't mean that it will not be brutal and bloody, and it could take years. But ultimately, he will lose, and the free world has to stand against him. And anybody in the Republican Party or the Democratic Party who suggests that we don't have a position as between Ukraine and Russia is advocating views that are at odds with the interests of the United States of America. And we have to be very clear about that, too. I think that one of the real challenges that we've faced in our party has been a growing sense of isolationism. We've certainly seen that for a while now. We see it on the Democratic side as well. But those people in our party who are advocating for the United States to withdraw from the world, who are advocating that somehow the United States shouldn't lead in the world anymore, the kind of world that we will all be living in, we can see now on a daily basis on our television screens when you see what's happening in Ukraine. Because if America doesn't lead, the people who fill the void are the Russians, are the Chinese, are the Iranians, are the North Koreans. And we cannot defend and protect our own freedom and our own security if we decide that we're going to withdraw from the world, if we decide we aren't going to lead the world. And so I'm going to be watching very closely and working very hard in the coming days and weeks, both in terms of supplemental assistance for Ukraine, but also we really need to take a look at our own defense budget. It is insufficient. And, we said 2 years ago and 3 years ago that our defense budget needed to increase by 3 to 5% annually in order to be able to meet the threats we face. It's now got to increase by at least 5% annually, and probably more than that. We're facing a growing threat in terms of the nuclear modernization we're watching happen in China. We are outgunned right now in the Indo-Pacific. We are watching increasing instability in Europe. And although there has been, I think, impressive unity with respect to standing for Ukraine, I think that what the Biden administration seems to be about to do with respect to Iran and re-entering the JCPOA is a real mistake. If the United States re-enters the JCPOA, we're going to lift sanctions on the Iranians. We're going to give the Iranians resources that they will be able to use to destabilize the region, and we're going to put them back on a path to a nuclear weapon. And on top of all of that, the Russians right now are basically facilitating and leading those negotiations to get back into the JCPOA, and that ought to stop immediately. The world has been unbelievably united in ways we've never seen when you have Switzerland stepping up and saying that they're going to impose sanctions on Russian accounts, and the extent to which the Germans have announced that they're going to go to 2% in their defense budget, and the weapons that have been provided. There's unbelievable unity in the world, and the world has to know that. The world has to know that the forces of freedom will win. And let me just say in closing, and then I look forward to taking questions, that as we have all of these debates and discussions at home, it is so important for us to remember, as we're thinking about people who we're going to support, who we're going to elect, who you're going to support in races back home, that the challenges we face as a country right now are really grave. They're really serious. And we have to support serious people. Right now, in our party, we have people who are anti-Semitic openly. We have people who are racist openly. We have people who have attended white supremacist conferences openly. And in politics, we always want to have a big tent. But no tent can ever be big enough for those views. And we all have to be very clear about that. The Democrats have to reject those views as well. We all have to reject those. And we have to get back to a time when we are having debates about substance and policy, and really vigorous debates, where we're standing up for principle, and we're debating with our fellow Americans about principle, and we're demanding substance from our elected officials. But fundamentally, we're also remembering always that we are not enemies. And that was, as Lincoln taught us, we cannot be enemies. We must not be enemies as we have these debates. We have to do everything we can to stop the vitriol. And I have certainly been guilty of it myself. I've got many tweets that, upon further reflection, might not want to have. Some of them were pretty funny at the time, though. But we all have to conduct ourselves in ways that are worthy of the challenges we face and of the really grave responsibility and duty we've been handed from previous generations of Americans that we have to hand to our kids. So thank you all for your time this evening. Thanks for listening, and I'd be happy to answer any questions anybody has.
Thank you.